I suppose I'm getting a little bit more feisty with it when people say to me, why don't you stand aside for X, Y, and Z, or why don't you do this? And my argument's like, rather than DMing me or messaging me, go message them. Go message them and say, why are you risking losing this election when the Green Party aren't even particularly campaigning in your area, but just have a candidate so people have choice? And I think it is important that people have choice. You can't assume that if a Green Party candidate doesn't stand, all of those votes would just go to one place. They could go all sorts of places. And I think it's important, people message me all the time and say, I was really excited to vote Green for the first time because I saw you on a podcast or saw one of your spokespeople on the TV. And you weren't on the ballot paper. And I do think that's heartbreaking. And actually, I think people should have the choice to vote Green. And so I would say, to Andrew Feinstein, if he wants to beat Keir Starmer, and I really want him to beat Keir Starmer, then join the Green Party, because his independent vote plus the Green Party demonstrates that Holborn and St Pancras could knock out the leader of the Labour Party, who I think most of the country absolutely can't stand at this point. That would be really exciting. So stop messaging me and telling me not to stand when we're a political party, that Andrew seems to align with our values and doesn't say anything that he doesn't align with our values, and start putting pressure on Andrew. Polite pressure, let's always be kind, but say, hey man, join the Green Party. They're saying you're welcome.
And for you, Zach, would you describe yourself as a socialist?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't use the word much because I think it can just put people off. And I think if you can describe your socialist politics in terms of redistributive economics, challenging wealthy and power and status, and saying let's move that around and let's make sure particularly the poorest communities are supported, then I think that speaks to people more than a word that they might not necessarily understand. But of course, eco-socialist politics is exactly where I'm at.
But you've had quite a political journey, right? Because it was back in, 2015 that you were on stage at Lib Dem Party conference singing Ain't No Mountain High Enough. And now here you are running to be Greens. I mean, how did that sort of political journey happen?
Yeah, I'd love that. If you'd asked me this question a few years ago, I think I used to have a slight panic of, this question's come up again. And I've just got really comfortable with it because actually I really realised that's the journey I want other people to go on. I know that not enough people have woken up or been born and landed in the Green Party, because otherwise we'd be a much bigger party than we already are, despite growing. What we do have is lots of people who know that they are politically homeless and are looking for a place. So that's great, join the Green Party, and that's a very easy argument to make. But I would say to people who are in the Lib Dems or even the Tories, because I think there are Tories who found Boris Johnson despicable. Kemi Badenoch is now just absolutely outrageous, and actually they want to conserve things. They want to conserve green spaces. They want to conserve our democracy, and they recognise that actually fundamentally the system is so unfair now that it is no longer defendable. So I think there's lots of people from all sorts of parties that believe things that I don't agree with, but actually I would like them to go on the same political journey that I've been on. And I went on the journey not because someone shouted, traitor at me or you're awful, but I saw Natalie Bennett in 2015 stand on stage during the debates and talk about the need to protect Syrian refugees. And I'd never seen someone speak with such principle on a national stage. A year later, during the Brexit referendum, I heard Caroline Lucas speak over and over again for European values and about the climate and nature crisis. And that's when I was like, that's the party that actually I feel at home on. So I've been on that journey, and that's what makes me absolutely convinced that literally millions of more people can be on that journey. And I don't think we should... I think we should judge people on what they're doing and what they're saying and where they're going. In fact, there's a Tony Benn quote, I don't care where you've been, show me where you're going.
And I mean, for you, for what you just said, right, about you even being happy to have people who have previously voted Tory then coming to Green. I mean, the Green Party do have this funny thing, right, where you can get votes from people who might be viewed as quite conservative, but they have these real problems or real issues about the environment. They really want to conserve their green spaces. They really care about climate change, but aren't necessarily aligned on all of those social policies or don't care about them as much. And then you've obviously got this quite metropolitan young people who care about sort of the socialist values that the Green Party tries to uphold. It's quite a broad spectrum to be catering to. How do you cut through?
Yeah, I think this is much easier than people imagine it is. So I did a lot of door knocking during the general election in deep rural seats. Now, I live in Hackney. I'm a London Assembly member. I'm wearing Doc Martens as we speak. Putting on wellies is not my it's not natural to me.
You're not going to be out on the farm.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. But people are people, whether you live deep in the city or whether you live in the countryside. And when I knock on doors in deep rural areas, even things like rent controls, people recognise that whether it's their children or grandchildren and they're living in the cities and they can't afford their rent and they're at threat of Section 21 eviction notices or whatever it might be, they recognise that's a deep problem. When you talk about the fact that, multimillionaires and billionaires, as I've spoken about in this interview a few times, but are earning more money than people could imagine in their lifetimes. Billionaires shouldn't even exist. I think that I think we're at a point in politics and in society where people are recognizing those things now, despite their previous voting history. So I'm not being disingenuous. Do I turn up on the doorstep in the exact same way? No, even down to like what you wear. You know, you have a think about that. I think that's basic communication, know your audience. But I'm not changing my values and I'm not changing my policies. It's a bit like if you're on a market and you're selling something, you're still selling the same thing, but just the way you shout about it or talk to the customer might be a little bit different. I'm always wary of analogies about customers because we're citizens and not customers. But in this analogy, I think that works.